Hello coders, welcome back to another tutorial. In this tutorial, it's about Spring Boot integration with Keycloak using the admin client. So I want to show you how we can integrate our Spring Boot project with the Keycloak server and using the Java SDK admin client. As you can see, this user, if you go to this our Keycloak, you can see we have two users, Bisky and test1. So what you want to do, we want to create another user called test2. So I will show you how you can do this. So if I run this, a new user has been created. So if I come here and reload this page, you can see this user is the user that we just created, and we can also log in with this user. So this tutorial, I will show you all the steps. So you can copy this and you can delete also this user. So we can test to delete this user. We want to delete this user, user2, and I can say execute. And you can see we get a success after deleting the user, and I can refresh here. The user has been deleted. So I want to show you how you can do this with Spring Boot and integration with this Keycloak, and we are using the latest version, and also we are going to update our server to use the latest version. On previous tutorial, we set up Keycloak and we created a server and we created a user. This user, we were using the portal. So in this tutorial, I want to show you how we can create a user using the Keycloak Java SDK, which is the admin client. So right now, as you can see, we have this version of this. This is the Keycloak SDK that you want to use for the admin, and we are on version 22.0.4. But let's go to our admin. So for you to be able to use this current version, your Keycloak version must match with your Keycloak server. So if you go to this admin, if you go to server information, you can see the version that I'm currently using. It's 16.1.0, and it's an old SDK. So we must upgrade our server to this latest, which was released on 4 October by the day of making this video, 22.0.4. So I updated our Docker Composer YAML so that we can use the latest version, which is 22.04. So now you can stop your server and you can use this new script. So let me first upgrade our server to this latest, and we can continue. So you can log into your server. And in your Docker Composer file that you used on the previous tutorial, here I have this Docker Composer file. So the server still is running, so I can say Docker Compose down. I want to stop this server so that I can upgrade it. Okay, so what I want to do right now is I want to remove this Docker Compose YAML. Then I can create a new one with the latest environment variable. So I will say remove. Then I will say I create a new one, which is an empty. This is an empty file, and you can copy this Docker. You can look it into our Spring Boot project. You can copy this YAML, which is for MySQL. If you want to use Postgres, I already have this one for Postgres, but for MySQL, we just copy this Docker Composer YAML. So I'm just copying this, and I can run the application using the latest one. Just copy as it is and run it. So I copied it. So after doing this, I can say Docker Compose up. Let's see if everything is working fine. So you can see it's now downloading the Keycloak version 22.0.4. So this is the same version, and the version must match 22.0.4 so that I can use this version from our Spring Boot project. So let's wait for this to start. So right now the application is now running. So let's test this one here. Currently it was version 16.10. So let's test this one. So the latest version does not have the auth. So the auth was removed. So what I want to do is I want to copy this URL. Let me copy the URL and open it with another. So let me open it here where it doesn't have an auth. You can see I opened the URL without any. This is the new version safer that we have. So the password, I put my password. So the password is the one that is in this, which is this one, the Keycloak admin, and your password that you set on your project. So for me, I updated that password, and I'm going to use my secret password. So this is my password. Let me sign in, and I will save this one. So you can see the previous is there. We are connecting to the existing MySQL database. So the previous realm is there for application. Okay, let me just use this one. I showed you in the previous tutorial how you can create a realm. So if you go to clients here, this is the admin client that we want to use when we want to log in. So you can go to this admin client. So this admin client, on this admin client, we want to have access to create a user from the REST API or from the SDK. So to enable that, we must enable client authentication and this service accounts roles. Just enable this, and in here we must update. Just add this URL and click save. So after to save this, it's because we want to see a credentials. We want to have a client secret and client credentials. That's why we enabled client authentication service here and adding that URL. So after saving this, we now have this section tab, which is credentials. So we have to copy our credential, our client secret. I will show you. We will copy. We come the year later and copy this one. Then in our savings account, if you want to create a user from the admin, from the REST API, which is this, you can see these are the REST endpoints that we can use, but we are going to use an SDK, which you call the same methods. So what you want to do is that we must give a permission to that client to be able to create a user, to be able to get user, to query users. So to add that permission, you go to service account rows and you can assign a new row and click here filter and filter by clients. And we want to look for manage room management, which is manage users. So we can go here. We are looking for manage users. Is not in this section. We need to assign this row. So after assigning this row, we are now okay, and this admin client will be able to create a user. So what we want to do to test if we are able to create a client with the REST. So let's copy the client ID. We already know it's admin client, and in here we have this client secret. I'll copy the client secret, and I'm going to use Postman. We must call this endpoint to get an access token, and if we have that access token, we are going to use this REST endpoint, which is admin realms, and this one. And we want to copy our, we need to copy our realm, copy our realm. This is the realm that we are going to use. So we update the URL. We have to update with the realm that we are going to use always. The first endpoint that we are going to use is the one to get the access token with the client. You can see the client, which is the admin client, and the secret. So if we send a request like this, we will get this token. So if we have this token now, we want to create a user using the REST, and the endpoint for creating a user using the REST is this one. So here the username, I can say test1. This is going to be my it's going to be a username, and here I can say test1, and I will remove this. Let me remove that. And the account is enabled. You must set a username, the email, first name, last name, credentials, which is the user is going to use to log in. And if you want to add this user into a certain group, and the attributes, you can add different groups. So the endpoint, you just use this endpoint, just know your server, admin, realms, your realm, which is Spring Boot code, and the endpoint, which is users. So for me, we have to use the authorization here. From authorization, you have to pick bearer token, and this is the token. You can use this token, which is for admin client. You can copy the token and you can put it here. After doing this, if we send this endpoint, you can see this user, it's a test1. So let's come here and go to users and see how many users do we have. We have this one, which is Bisky, and we want to create another one with REST, and this one we created through the portal. So what we want to do is to hit this endpoint. You can see it means 200, we get a success, means a user has been created. So let's refresh this page and see our new user. This is the new user that we created right now, and the email is not verified, so I can mark it as verified and click save. And with this user, we can log in with this user using the same endpoint. This is the endpoint. Let's go to the login endpoint. For login endpoint, this is the test1, and this is the password for this user. So for this endpoint, this is the we are going to use a client ID. We created our custom client ID, and the username, which is this one that we used here, and the password, which is the test123, which is this one, and the grant type is a password because we are using username and password. Let's check if we have this client ID, because we want to use this client ID. So let's go to the client IDs. Let's go to the clients. Do we have that one? Yes, we have the client. This is the client that you are going to use. This is our custom client, so we are okay. So what you want to do, let's just to log in. You can see we have this now. We have this new user, and this user is logged in. So if you go to this user, test1, and you can go to sessions, you can see the session, the time that we logged in, and this is our, and the client ID that we used, and the IP address. So all of this it's fully managed by Keycloak. So we want to use this REST APIs in our Spring Boot project. I showed you the dependence that we are going to use, and this dependence is this one, 22.0.4. so this same version that we have here, so we are using this version 22.0.4 5.4. So this same version is the same version that we are seeing here, which is this one on our Keycloak server. So the version must match, so that we can avoid the issues of errors with the SDK. So let's add this dependency in our Maven. So in our Maven, we must add the dependency for Keycloak, and these dependencies we must add for the rest easy, because they use a rest easy. So let's add this for the rest, this one for Keycloak, and the one for the rest easy. This one is the one that will send request to the admin. So we are using it. Maybe you're familiar with REST template or fan client, but here they use the REST easy. So we have to use this REST easy. You must add this dependence. So after adding, so in my properties, I'm now setting the versions. So the version of REST easy that I'm going to use is 6.25 final, and our server version for Keycloak. Then I will refresh the dependencies so that you can download latest dependencies. So dependencies has been downloaded. So we want to add some configurations here. So on previous tutorials, we already added some configurations for JWT when I showed you how to use Keycloak and sign in with a certain URL. But right now I want to configure the one for the beans, for our bean, Keycloak bean. So I can call it beans. I want to create beans in this class. This is the class that I add. Then we say configuration, so that they can be loaded when the application starts. And the bean that I want to create is called Keycloak, which is coming from the SDK. So Keycloak, this is the bean that I want to add, and here I'll just say add bean. Then it will return, we just say use a Keycloak builder. You say Keycloak, we want to use this Keycloak builder dot builder. So in our builder, we want to set a server URL. Server URL. We will configure this one. A server URL is this URL. You can see this is going to be our server URL. This one, which is Keycloak, this one that we are using here, this is going to be our server URL. So we can configure it later. Then here, the next thing, we want to configure the realm. The realm is the one that we created. This one, which is Spring Boot code. Then we want to set a grant type. Let's set a grant type here. And we want to, let's see, we want to set a client ID also, and the client secret. And we just say build. So these credentials that you want to do here, client secret here. So these credentials, you can see the grant type, the server URL, and the grant type. The grant type we are going to use client credentials. So I can say auth client credentials. This one, we want to use this one. So there are different grant types that are there. We can use password, you can use auth code, you can use many of them, but we want to use this one, which is client credentials. So why did I choose this client credentials? This is the one that we used here. You can see before we created a user, we just used this grant type, which is client credentials. So we are configuring this configs on our Keycloak builder. and this is the client secret that you are going to use, the client ID and the client credentials. So let's add these configurations into our application YAML. So I will just add this and explain to you. So I created these configurations in our application YAML. The realm that we are going to use is Spring Boot code, and the domain, which is CodeWithBisky.com, and the admin client, which is the client that we are going to use to create a user. And I showed you how to add some roles on the portal so that this client will be able to create users. So it's like we added those roles like permissions. And this is the client secret, and this client secret is the same as this one, and this is the client ID. And also this ID that we are going to use, which is for authentication, we are going to use it later. And our domain, which is this one, which is the CodeWithBisky.com. So if you come back to our bins, these are the configurations. So for the client now, we are going to replace this with the for server URL. I will just say server URL. And for the realm, I will just say realm. We are now taking them from the application YAML. And for the secret, this is going to be our secret, and this is going to be the client. So by doing this, we can now start to use this bin, which is this bin Keycloak, to create a user. So this one is responsible for login, for authentication and authorization of our client credentials. So let's now go to the implementation of creating a new user. So we are going to create a new service, which I'm going to call let's create a new package, and this package I can call it Keycloak. And we want to create a new service. Let's create a new interface, and I can say it Keycloak user service, right? And it's going to be an interface, right? And in our interface, it will going to return, for now, let's just say an object. Let's just say a general an object, and this one is going to be create user. We are going to use this one to create a user. A first method is to create a user. If you want to create a user, we need a DTO for creating a user. So let's go to our DTOs and copy one from this, and or let me say Java class, and it's of type record. I'm using Java 17. So this one, it's about user registration record, like this. These are the fields that we need. We need a username when creating a user. I showed you. We need a first name, or we need an email, string first name, last name, so far these are the fields that I'm thinking. We need also a password. A user password. So this is the one that I'm thinking right now. So let's go to our service, this one, and we want to return this also, and we can pass it here. And we need also an object. For now, let's say just a user representation. Let's say user representation, this one. which is from, then say get user by ID. This here we pass our string ID, user ID. So this one is coming from Keycloak. For each user, if you want, with the user that we created, we can get those details by doing that. So we can also add another one, and I can call it void this one, and I can say delete user. Delete user by ID, and you can pass the user ID. So let's create the implementation of this class. New Java class, and we can call it add impl, and this is going to. So before I forget anything, to avoid like now pointer exceptions, just add service. That's what I do. And let's add, I'm using Lombok, so let's add SF4J. This one we are going to use for our log. And remember, it's private. Here, private, we want to use this bin, which is Keycloak. So let's say private Keycloak like this, and let's create a constructor. So you can see it as it auto wired this bin, this Keycloak. So we are going to use everywhere. So I avoided to initialize this bin every time when I want to use this. So we just create a one object that is available throughout the application, and this application is the Keycloak. So after doing this, let's add an implementation of this, which is our implementation. Let's implement all these methods to create a user, to get a user, and to delete a user. So in here, that's where we are starting our logic to create a user. So if you want to create a user with this Keycloak, I showed you about this user representation. This is the one that you use when you want to create a user, or you want to get a user, or to delete a user. So this object is the one that we are going to use. So when in here, we want to use this object, user representation. So this user representation, we just say a user. We want to create a user equals to new. We want to enable the user, set enabled. We want to enable the user. So after, when creating the user, we want to enable the user after creating it, or let's you say set username by order, and the username is coming from this object dot get username, or its username. It's now, we are now using. Then you want to set email. Set email. First name. Last name. You can say set email verified. Let's just say the email has been verified. Let's just set it to true. On the later videos, I will show you how we can verify the emails through the endpoint. So for now, just do this. So after doing this, we need another one, which is a credential. So here we created a user, right? We are going to create this user, but we must assign credentials to this user. So we want to say credentials representation. So for the credentials representation, we want to set a value. The value is the password that we added here. This is the password. And temporary, we want to set it to false. We want this user to be able to log in. Set temporary to false. I think by default it's true. The type of this password, I can say set type. For the type, we are going to use this one, which is password. So for this user, we want to set the credentials now. We want to, but after creating this user, we want to assign a password for this user. So what you want to do, there's a user set credentials. I think it's this one, set credentials. It allows a list of credentials. So this one is going to be a list, array, a list. So what you can do is just say list of this and import, and you say, I will just say list equals to new array list. And in this list, this is going to be list of credentials dot add credentials presentations, and I will add this list here like this. So right now I added these credentials. I assigned these credentials to this user. So a user can have multiple credentials, either password, either TOTP, secret. All of these credentials can be assigned to this user. We want to save this record. So we want to use the realm resource, the Keycloak realm resource. So what we can do, we just say Keycloak, this one, Keycloak realm, and we need to pass our realm. This is the same realm that we added into our beans. This one is the same. So just copy this realm and come and put it here. Just put it here. It's going to be the same realm, right? So then this is going to be our realm resource. So with this realm, we want to use a user. So there are different types. So we want to use a user, which is a users, this one, a users, because you want to create a user. So you want to use a type of the resource of users. So you can see this, in here we get a list of endpoints. These are the same endpoints that we were calling here. So they are called realm, they are called a user resource because we are calling to a certain resource. So we want to create a new resource. So let me do this. Let's go back. So after doing this, I just say create a user. And we can create a user now, and we get a response. So this is the endpoint to create a user. So if you create a user, it's either successful or not successful. If in case of we have a duplicates email or duplicate usernames, the user won't be created. So let's just check for a success here. We want to say, or I can say, if status, when we create a user, it's going to be 201. So if you create new thing like in post put, if something record is successful, if you create a new record, the return response code is supposed to 201. That's the standard, and that's the best way when creating API. So this API is returning 201. So what we can do here, but I don't like this way of doing this. Let's use objects from Java. I think it was added Java 8, whereby you just say 201, comma. Yeah, let's use this one. So this one, if it's success, we want to retain this user that we created. So if it's not successful, we are going to have an error coming from this API. So what I want to do now is, like, on this response, we want to read an entity. We want to read an entity, and this entity, it will return a message. So, okay, before I do that, by now it's either returning a now or a, so what I want to do, let's just do this. Let me comment this one. I know here there's an error. If this is now and that error will come to our API. So let's leave it like this. So here I want to extract this code, and I right click and do refactor, and I want to extract this method, and it does everything for me, which is get resource, and this is the one that I want to use. So here let's put in line. So forget user. If I have user ID, I want to use this same method, which is the user. I want to use this method. So it's going to be so here it's a get resource, then get, we pass the user ID, and then we change it to representation, and it's going to be a user. So this endpoint, it's going to get a user by ID. So this is the resource to get a user by ID. You can see this one, it's going to be the delete. So for a delete, we just do the same. Delete, and we pass the user ID, and it will return a success. So I showed you how to create a user now, how to get a user, and how to delete a user with Keycloak. So what's next now? We want to create our API, our controller, which is going to create a user, delete a user, and get a user. So let's now create a new controller. And this controller here, we have APIs, we have stripes. So let's just create this one, and this one I can call it this API. I can call it Keycloak. It's for user, Keycloak user API. This is my custom one. So here I just say we can copy what you already have. Just copy this. So for this, it's going to be users. And for the service, this is the service that I want to use. I'll just say private, and let me import this, and I can make it final. It's a constructor. I added OArgs constructor. It means this one is now a constructor, so there's no need to create a constructor. And the method that I want to use first is we want to create a method to post a user. So the method we want to post means we want to create a user. So we just say add post mapping like this. Then make the name of our method, it's public. We want to return this object, which is user registration record. We want to return this one. We can import this. Then we say create user, and we want to also pass the same object. So here we must say at request body. That's why I love Spring Framework. It's easy. So to create a user, I'm just going to use this service, which is Keycloak user service implementation. I just want to return this dot create user in the user record. That's all. That's all. Now we are able to create a user from our REST. So from the REST. So I will show you but we are still have one issue that you want to solve. So I will show you after this, after adding other endpoints. So the other endpoint that you want to use here, it's get user. So this one, get user. This one, to get a user, we want to use a logged in user. So here it's going to be a get mapping. So when a user is logged in on the application, we must be able to get a user. So here I will just say principal. So this principal is from Spring Security to get the user from the token. So a logged in user. So I can get user by ID. And here I'll just say get name. So get name is going to be our user, and it's supposed to be user representation. This one, we are going to have this one. So this is going to be our get. So let's add another one, which is delete. So here it's not get mapping, it's delete mapping. And we want to delete the user. We can delete the user. I can delete myself, my user, or I can, so let's say delete user. So I want to delete user by ID. Maybe someone wants to delete the user, the admin of the application, string user ID. So here I'll just say delete user by ID, of which it is a void, and it's user ID. So here it's supposed to return nothing. So what you can do here is just, and then we just say user ID, and you can say path variable. Here it's supposed to be a path variable like this. After doing this, we can delete a user. So we want to test our implementation using I don't want to use Postman here, but I told you we have an issue here when a user creates, when we are creating a user on an application, we must allow that endpoint to be open, to be public, so that since our application is security behind, so we must allow that endpoint, this one for post, to be able to use it without any issue with security or any issue with authentication. So what I can do before I show that, before we fix that, I want you to be familiar also with the security, how it works, maybe in case we don't know why I'm doing that. So what we want to do, we have this one, which is API integration. So let me run this application. So our application has been started. So we integrated this application with the Swagger. If you watched our previous tutorial, so I want to access this application on this port and 1995 and here. So what I do is that I will come here and I will say localhost at port 1995, and I will add this API integration I put double, then I will say swagger UI.html. Then if I open this, it will open the swagger. So these are the endpoints that we added, right? So we want to create a user. So to create a user, you can see this is the post method of creating a user, and we want to send these variables. And if I try to send these variables here, username, I will just say test2, and email is test2 at gmail.com. First name test2 is going to the last name. Password is test81234. So if I try to hit this endpoint, you can see you are going to have issue with authentication to this endpoint. So here we don't have permission to create a user. So this endpoint is supposed to be public. Without logging in, we have to create this user. So what we want to do, let's go to our security, which is our web security, and let's look for post. In our post method, because it's the one that we want to then for posts we just say users. So if you go to here, we want to allow this endpoint to be, we want to allow this to be public, which is a post mapping. So that's why I added this into our the post method will be filtered. So let's run the application again. So the application is started again. So in our Keycloak here, in our administration, we can see the number of, let's log in again. We have test1, but we want to create another test2 with the implementation of Spring. So we want to do, let's execute this. You can see it's a success, no error now of 401. So let's look into the administration part. We have this new user, which is test2, and this is the user, and this is the user ID. So let's go again to our Swagger and see if our get method is working, and let's click try out. The problem that you have with this, it's going to return 401 because it's supposed to be called with the user who has logged in. So this one is a test2. So we want to log in. Let's go to our login endpoint, which I showed you. It's going to be a test2, and let's hit this endpoint and get a token. So in our Swagger, let's go back to our Swagger, and on this authorizer, let's add our token here, which we created with the Postman, and click close, and let's test get user. So I have an issue. It failed to return to that because we are using the old logic. So we have to remove this auth because this new version of Realm does not have an auth. So let's restart this. As you can see, after we run our application, we get again a 401 with a valid token. It's because of that endpoint. So let's test again now. Okay, our room here, it's because of our room. Let's update our room and let me run again. So I removed the auth which was here, and I updated our room because we are now using this new room, which is Spring Boot code. So let's test again. You can see after updating our room and removing the auth path variable, you can see we are now able to get a user who is logged in, which is test2. So if we want to delete that record, it's also the same. We can just copy. We have the ID. We just copy the ID, and we can come here to the delete method, which is here, and then I will say try out, and I'll add the ID, and I can execute this one. and we get a success. So let's see if the user is still exists. If I go to users, you can see the user has been deleted. So thank you guys for watching this video. I hope you are now understanding the Keycloak, and I showed you how you can integrate with the Spring framework, on how we can configure these clients, testing with Postman, testing with the Swagger, and developing it, and all the dependencies that are required to run this project. So if you are new to this channel, may you kindly subscribe, click the notification bell so that you'll be notified whenever we upload new videos. Salut coders, let's meet on another Keycloak next video.